This meeting. I'd like to welcome the use of the Welsh language at public meetings. I have not received notice that members or invited attendees wish to use Welsh today, and therefore the meeting will be conducted in English only. Can I welcome to the meeting as well Tracy Peed and Neil Jones, our Communications Officer. Apologies. We had any apologies, please? Jacqueline? Okay.
Just one apology from Councillor Kelly Preston.
Can I welcome Tim James, our legal representative, to the meeting? Can you help us with our declarations, please, Tim?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Committee members, I'm not aware of any declarations that need to be made today. Can I just remind you that if there are any declarations made either now, once I've just given a bit more explanation, or indeed later on during the committee, if any items do arise, then you should please record that in the appropriate place within the attendance register. Having viewed the agenda items today, Chair, pardon me, my view is that there aren't any matters that, in my view, would require any declarations of interest. I see that item 6, dealing with school attendance, that report is a borough-wide report, if you like, and deals with attendance throughout the borough, so I don't see that that's specific to any schools of which, for example, members might be governors or have relatives either attending the school or working at those schools. Item 7 does mention 3 specific schools, but that's simply for noting, is my understanding, by this committee. So again, in relation to that, I'm not aware of any basis on which I would be advising anyone to declare any interest. So that's my advice, Chair, unless you or any of the members have any questions for me at this time, please.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you. Minutes of the meeting held on the 13th of the 7th. You all happy with those minutes? Thank you very much. Agenda item 5, which is the action sheet. The action's been completed. Are you all happy with that? You all received the notification? Okay, we move on then to agenda item 6, which is the school attendance report. You see there the report in front of you. And we welcome Tracy Peed to the meeting, Head of Pupil Support. Tracy, would you like to take us through the report briefly, please?
Absolutely. As you can see, whilst our attendance has not declined, it's remained static both in primary and secondary schools for about the last 3 years. Some individual schools have made huge gains, and then other schools have not made those gains, so that's why it's plateaued off. So it's remained pretty static. So our primary attendance has been around about 94.9 since 2014. We haven't had the absolute figure for 16-17 yet, because that gets verified by the Welsh Government at the end of this term for primaries. But we can say that our Torfaen secondary schools, that data is verified at the end of May. That's been at 93.7% for the last 3 years. So the background to this report then is that we knew that we needed to do something to improve our attendance levels. Attendance is crucial crucial to pupil attainment. Lots of research will tell you that that's the case. And actually, when we talk about 95% being our sort of critical attendance level, that still means you're missing quite an amount of school. So attendance is vital to achievement. Plus, as I also manage the Education Welfare Service, we know that there are, welfare issues, and if pupils are not in school, then they're more at risk. And so the service worked very hard to make sure that pupils are in school. And if you look at our unauthorised absence levels, they are low, and that's because lots of my EWOs go out and visit and make sure that any absences are authorised. So there are two strands of this. Then there's the welfare side of it, and then there's the school achievement side of it. So we work closely with our schools, or we have worked very closely with our schools. We have a school-to-school attendance group. So we've invited one head teacher for each of the clusters, and others who might be interested. We invited, for example, the deputy head of Abersucken School, because they've worked really hard to improve their attendance this year. And then we had a sort of a discussion about how we could improve attendance. And I think, along with my colleagues in other SUC areas, we've realised that from time to time you do have to have a refresh, you have to reframe, you have to make sure that parents and carers understand the importance of school attendance, and that pupils do too. So we're in this process of doing this refresh at the moment. The sort of systems that we're going to employ actually come from, it's quite a long time ago now. This was developed as good practice in California. So it's called the CALIO system, so you will hear it called the CALIO system. And it's just a very positive attendance management system, if you like, that engages parents, that engages pupils, and actually keeps reiterating those key messages about how important attendance is. So the CALIO system was adopted by many schools in England. It was adopted by many local authorities in Wales. Actually, Central South adopted it 2 years ago, and they had an over 1% increase in attendance in a year, which is good. Blind and Gwent have adopted it. When I was in Newport, we adopted it. So it's just a set of steps to follow, really, and it is about engaging all stakeholders. It's a very positive system. So this is why we looked at the CALIO system. With Neil's help as well, and the school attendance group, we've developed a whole strategy around improving attendance, which gives clear steps for the schools to follow, followed by clear steps for the EWOs to follow. We've used a traffic light system because we want to be, if you like, emphasising with parents, if your pupil is in the red zone, you're going to have to do something about it. And if you don't do something about your pupil's attendance, if you don't support us, then we get into the realms of doing, and it's in here, doing attendance action plans for the pupil with the school, so we monitor their attendance. The amber, that's a warning, be aware. And then the green, congratulations and well done. So there's a series of letters that we've developed for both secondary schools and primary schools that they will send out half-termly. We can generate those letters through the School Information Management System, SIMS. So as soon as I have a meeting with the school-to-school group on Wednesday and they agree which letters we'd like to place on SIMS, then the schools will be able to let their parents know where their pupils are at the touch of a button. We've also thought about how best we can sell this system to our pupils. So we've come up with a Strive for 95 campaign. Our tagline, along with the traffic lights, is not in, miss out, because if you're not in school, you will miss out. You will miss out as far as your lessons are concerned. You'll miss out on forming your friendships and being a part of the school. So it is all about trying to sort of get young people to be in school and to have the support of their parents as well. So we came up with a Strive for 95 award, And every year we've got a computer-generated programme that will randomly pick out 8 pupils, 2 from each key stage, that will win a voucher for £50. And we're hoping that that will be presented at a council meeting, and that our photographs will be taken and we'll be able to share those photographs as well. That's one part of it. Neil's developed a whole communication strategy altogether. We have. We've looked at posters that will go out in council offices, in Greggs and in libraries and dentists and GPs to sort of drive that message home as well. We've also decided that we'd like to congratulate parents on supporting their son or daughter. And we're going to send out a letter signed by the Chief Education Officer and the exec member that will thank them for supporting their son or daughter to get 95% over the school year. So we'll do that annually. And we've also got a whole Facebook campaign that we've put together. So we'll be sending out regular messages, those key messages that you saw in the report. We'll be sending those out as well, just to try and keep nagging, if you like. So those messages that will go out on Facebook, they'll also go out on the school's website as well. We inform them which message we're putting out. So every 2 weeks the message is going out. What I also hope is that young people will be enthused by this, and Neil can talk a little bit more about the web at the minute, but we're hoping they'll take photographs of receiving their attendance awards. We're hoping they'll come up with new slogans that they'll want to celebrate their class's success, so they'll be able to put that on the website. So it's about getting a conversation going about attendance and how important it is. I'm hoping as well that they'll come up with some new slogans and some new messages as we go through the year to refresh every 2 weeks as well. So it is very much about us co-constructing this together. We've also developed a draft consortia attendance policy, and this policy fits neatly within this. So all the other authorities are going to be looking at doing something similar if they haven't already done so. And we've also looked at a protocol to support and to challenge our schools to improve their attendance. So the first step of that will be if they find themselves in amber for 2 months running, we'll have a conversation with the head teacher, with the senior EWO, and perhaps with the chair of governors. And then after that, it'll be a more formal meeting where we'll ask them to come in, and the chief education officer, exec member, head teacher and chair of governors will talk about that. At the first meeting, we'll put an attendance action plan in place for the school, and we'll support them with that. And then we'll ask them to report back on that if their attendance hasn't improved. And then lastly, you know, and as a very last resort, under the schools causing concern policy from Welsh Government, we can actually issue warning notices. And we did that last year with Abersycon. And as I said, you know, we've had a really concerted effort at Abersycon. If you go to Abersycon, you can see that they've got battle boards where pupils know whether they're in red or amber or green. And I've seen that for myself, because when I was in the canteen, I was amazed how much interest the young pupils have going up and saying, oh, I was amber last month and now I'm green, or I was red. So they've done a lot about trying to sort of encourage good attendance, and that's why we've asked Charlotte to come to our school-to-school group to pass on some good practice. And the purpose of the school-to-school group is to share good practice, is to learn from each other about what works and what doesn't work, so we can all work together to improve our attendance. Okay.
Members' questions? Councillor Carroll.
If I could start really with a question about Estyn. It says in 4.4 on page 25, Estyn have made it quite clear that whilst improvements have been made, progress has not been sufficient. Given how close these results are anyway, we're talking about 0.1, so we're talking about very small numbers. And given the fact that, for example, Torfaen has probably the highest number of Gypsy Traveller families in the whole of Wales, do you think that Estyn are just looking at numbers, or they actually have an understanding underneath this about attendance and attainment?
I'm going to have to be careful about what I say. I suppose what Estyn is saying is that we haven't, we've stayed static. I have explained to them, because I manage the Gypsy Traveller Service and I've been engaged with Gypsy Traveller education for a long time. And, the Gypsy Traveller team and the EWOs work very, very hard to engage the Gypsy Traveller families. What I always advise the schools to do, Westmont and certainly George Street, is always to disaggregate their attendance figures so they can show the figures with Gypsy Travellers and without, because as you know, the requirement for Gypsy Traveller education is that they only need to attend for 200 sessions a year, because the law and attendance codes take into account that they can travel as part of their heritage. They're allowed to do that. So I have explained that to Estin. And I think it's like everything, all of the statistics that we send out, it's about context as well as much as anything. So I did disaggregate the figures and especially show them the two schools, Westmont and George Street, with that with the disaggregated attendance. And I think they get it. I don't think they probably get how hard we try to make sure our Gypsy Travellers are in school. And just as a point of information, we've got more Gypsy Travellers in school in Torvine than we've ever had. So we've got about 216 at the moment who are in our schools. And whilst before we used to have them in mainly two schools, one primary school, George Street, and one secondary school, Westmont, they are now in 8 schools across the borough. So, it's very important that people understand the challenges, but also the support as well. And the Gypsy Traveller Service work very hard to maintain relationships. And it's very important for Gypsy Traveller young people to be in attendance and in school and achieving, because that is those are the good role models we need for the rest of the population to take that on board. And I think we've worked really hard in Torvine to have those aspirations for all our pupils, but especially for our Gypsy Traveller pupils. One of the things we do as a matter of course is look at our vulnerable groups data on attendance and exclusions, actually. So we track all our vulnerable groups. Estin have a group of what they call vulnerable group pupils. That includes Gypsy Travellers, BME learners. That includes disabled learners, learners who might be what we call in difficult circumstances. So it's really important that our LAC pupils, for example, it's really important that we know that these pupils are in school, especially, as I said, the flip side of that data is the welfare. And it's about making sure if pupils aren't in school, where are they and what's happening to them? So.
Yeah, but I suppose I still come back to my original question. Do you think that Estin actually get? I mean, there's a multitude of issues around attendance. The price of holidays in their school terms whilst I do get the feeling sometimes with Estin. And perhaps I'll give you an example. I was recently, as the chair of the EAS Audit Committee, I was recently interviewed by Estin. And their first question was, why have you formed an audit committee? It was one of their recommendations from the previous, and so I do sometimes wonder exactly where, it seems to me that they just look at numbers sometimes.
I would totally agree with that. I'm an Estin inspector, and I have to say I think the new framework is a lot more understanding than the old framework. For example, I've had training in June around writing reports, and when we write reports we always used to do the good bit and then the but and however, but the but and howevers are gone now, thank goodness, so I'm really pleased about that. But I think data statistics tell you one story, but there is an underlying story, and this is why I suppose when we came up with our support and challenge for our schools, it's about going to schools, having a chat with them, making sure that we're challenging them, but also supporting them as well to make sure that to help them to improve attendance. But you're right, you can get totally bewildered by numbers and figures. And if you look at our performance, we've actually gone up. Unauthorised absence is really good. We've actually gone up, but I think it's about. Welsh Government would tell you that 95 is the optimum level for attendance. So even at 95%, you're still missing a considerable amount of school. So I suppose that's what we're aiming for, is the 95 plus. But the strategy is just to actually I don't think it's been done for quite some time. I don't think we've had a refresh for quite some time. So that's basically what it's about, is refreshing and see where we are. Schools are on board. We share the attendance data with them every month. They know if they're red or amber or green. There's a bit of healthy competition. And I suppose through our web design as well and our web page, we want to encourage schools to have that, pupils to have that healthy competition as well.
Can I bring in Matt Ford? Sorry.
Yeah, the figures always worry me because they don't tell the overall story. Often you've got children who are on modified days for their benefit as well as the schools. But obviously, when they're not in school and on modified days, that's classed as an absence. And also children who are accessing the PRU. And children who remain on the books of schools, but accessing the PRU, and their attendance will always be low. And then that affects the school attendance. So that concerns me greatly, that this happens, and there's no two ways of presenting your data. If you could exclude them or put them in a different data category, then the actual picture would be a lot different than what you actually see on paper. The school that I'm chair of governors of, one of our ESTIN recommendations was to improve attendance, but it also says we're doing all we can to improve attendance. So there's only so much you can do as a school to improve attendance.
Would that be something that you'd be looking at? Would be the children in the PRU, how you could disaggregate that from the school's performances, targets?
I manage the PRU, or I manage the head of the PRU, so that sits under myself as well. We never had a dedicated EWO for the PRU until last year, when I designated an amount of time to an EWO to be specifically responsible for the PRU. The one thing about the PRU pupils is that we know, because of their background and where they are, they've not usually engaged with their school experience. So to engage them in another school type experience is hard. So we do an awful lot around alternative provision. But the thing about our PRU pupils is we have to know where they are, because we are worried about their welfare. So this is a constant battle. When we have PRU management committees, we talk constantly about attendance and about the young people we're worried about. I suppose the part of the PRU that doesn't get discussed as well is actually we have a really, really good and effective anxiety group. So those young people who might otherwise have been school phobic or not attending school, we do have a specific anxiety group. And we work very hard with them to sort of integrate them into the group over time, because some of them haven't been to school for quite some considerable time. So that is something we can look at with schools, but schools are very supportive of the PRU, and they do understand that it has a knock-on effect, but actually they still feel part of the whole education package for that young person, and to me that's really important, that we don't put sort of too many cut-offs from their school, because what we're hoping is that the young people may actually go back to school. So they may go to it's supposed to be a revolving door. We're hoping that they will be able to go back to school. So it's really important to keep those links.
One observation, one question. I think one should be careful about talking about disaggregating groups, because you then got the potential for gaming. You have to watch that. My observation is there you mentioned a target or a figure of 95%. Is that an official target, or is that the measure that the state has been compared against, or I haven't seen a target figure in here. Maybe I've missed it.
We we suggest targets for schools, and we suggest the target looking at them being above what we call the median, so in the first or second quartile. We'd like all our schools to be in the first or second quartile, but we appreciate, that some of them have a journey to go. We also look at their position in their family of schools, because that closely sort of compares schools with the same context, socioeconomic, etc. So our target for our young people, we've called it our strive for 95, and it's a strive for 95 plus, because if we can get young people into school for 95% plus of the time, we know that then we're maximising their opportunities. So our very aspirational target is primary schools, we're aiming for 96%, and for secondary schools, we're aiming for 95%. Those are aspirational and challenging targets for us, but we think that that gives our young people the best chance. Some schools have got targets higher than that because of the family of schools that they're in and their median. So, for example, we've got schools who were in quartile 1 last year, so we've asked them to essentially look at the sort of the bandwidth for their quartile and set their target, looking at an improvement. But this is all, it's almost like British cycling, isn't it? It's the having marginal gains. So if you're at 97.1, to get 97.2 is tough. If you're right down at sort of 93, to get 95, if you can engage young people, is probably more achievable. So for some schools it is about marginal gains. For other schools it is about a lot. And for each individual pupil, it's about looking at their performance as well and trying to make sure that we get them into school as much as we possibly can.
So it's not an overall target then, it's a target for each individual school based on the context of that school?
Yeah.
Which the local...
We suggest it, yeah, we work it out and we suggest it. And then that goes to governing bodies, and it's up to governing bodies whether they want to sort of accept that target or not. And we have conversations with them if they come back and say that they don't want to.
Sorry, Councillor Cowan.
Just to say, I get the feeling from the report, if it's not actually explicit in it, that other authorities are improving more than we are. I presume we're looking at those authorities to see why they're improving more than we are. And I can understand there's no magic bullet on this. But do we have a feeling why they're improving faster than we are?
I think those authorities, and if you look at SUC, for example, we sort of alternate between 2 and 3. So last year, Blaenau Gwent were a little bit better than us because they had a refresh of their attendance strategy the year before. And so, we're hoping that this will give us that lift that we want. Certainly in Central South, they introduced this in 2013. I make no apologies for the fact that some of the information in the pack, some of the letters and ideas are from their good practice, and we've learned from good practice in other places. But they had a 1.5% increase as a consortia, which was quite phenomenal. Aberystwyth had 1.5% increase last year, and that was phenomenal for a school. So I'm sure that. We just needed to come back to have a think about. I've been managing the service for 2 years now. We just needed to think about things like training, making sure schools are using the correct codes, cleansing our data, because there is a trick there to make sure that before we have to give the secondary results in at the end of May, that we're actually sitting down, the EWOs are sitting down with schools and cleansing the data and maximising, making sure that we've used the right codes, maximising our attendance. And they've done the same thing for the schools in September this year, because the September cut-off is on the 30th of September. So it is about, we have learnt, we've looked at Powys. Powys have done those similar sorts of things. I've written an attendance policy for schools if they want, all of this is optional for schools. The school attendance group, we've looked at bits and pieces. I developed an attendance policy. If they want to sort of get their parents to sign up to the attendance policy, they can do that. And that was, that was sort of looked at using other schools. Lots of other schools sort of in the region had used it, so I sort of took it and put it together and came up with an attendance policy. So we are learning from practice elsewhere.
You mentioned that a region had gone up by 1.5%. That is pretty phenomenal. But did they start from a lower base? Because that's, as you said earlier, that's the easiest trick, isn't it? When you're starting off from low down, you can make massive improvements.
Yes, they did. Cardiff were their biggest region, and Cardiff have done a lot of work on this. I mean, really for us, if you think about it, we're sort of 94.9, 94.8, 94.9. You know, we just need to, for us, it is about marginal gains, and I think what will work for us is something that we haven't done, I don't think we've ever done it, is actually, you know, give rewards, make fusses, you know, try and get things out on you know, on the web and everything. I think that part of it, and engaging with parents and carers and businesses, I think that part of it we haven't done. So I'm hoping that will give us enough to sort of push us up. I mean, you know, 94.9. If I could make a percentage point, then I'd probably be doing cartwheels around the room.
So Helen, sorry.
As we're talking about the rewards, I'm a little bit concerned about the rewards, the £50 prizes and stuff. If a child has a medical condition and needs to attend hospital appointments regularly, then they're never ever going to be able to achieve that. And I think that's a really, really non-inclusive policy. And I'm really not keen on that, that, you know, a child with kidney failure who needs to go to dialysis a couple of times is unable to achieve that. Is there any other thing you can do where you can include a child who has to attend medical appointments so that they can still possibly achieve that and be in the draw?
Yes, we've looked at that, you know, and obviously, because I'm head of pupil support, I know, you know, many parents, pupils who might struggle to make that. What we've looked at is having a special award which schools will nominate a pupil, so they will be able to say, well, this, you know, this pupil's attendance might have gone up from 30% to 35%, but for them it's been a, you know, that's been a huge effort. So they will be able to nominate, and then we'll have a discussion with the school-to-school attendance group to decide who would win it. Because it is important to be inclusive. Yeah. It's like, you know, the Gypsy Travellers as well. You know, they won't be able to get the 95% if they are travelling and they're doing the 200 sessions, but if they've done the 200 sessions, we should be looking to reward them as well.
Did you say that are all schools signed up to this strategy, or are there some that are doing their own sort of ways of working?
We presented it. You know, the school-to-school attendance group have a representative from each cluster. So we've gone through this, we've developed it with the EWOs, we've presented it to them. They were happy with it. They've gone back to talk about their clusters. We've presented it to head teachers. The final sign-off is sort of next week, if you like, when they'll decide which of these materials, you know, we're sort of going to use, which letters they want to use. But basically, we've said that we're not forcing schools to do this. What we've said is, here's good practice. We've put loads of materials together for you, including designing posters and the whole comms strategy. I've also, along with the all the strategies, I've designed things like PowerPoints that they can use in assemblies, that they can use with their pupils. So we're not saying you have to use it, but we're saying this is good practice. We know it works, and most of them are sort of well up for this, and are looking forward to using some of the letters. The half-termly letters that schools send out to parents with the traffic light system, that has been incredibly successful in creating the debate in school. Things like the battle boards that I was talking about in Abersucken. It's about getting that debate in school about your class maybe the best this month, and being able to sort of take a photograph and share that, and get it's about getting that sort of chatter going in the system about how important good attendance is.
Shepherd?
How much extra time does it take out of the teachers' day doing obviously all the extra, the firework, the traffic light system? Is it going to impact on the teaching time, or is it provisions made for these things?
There are processes in place at the moment. I mean, most schools run attendance panels, and the feedback from the school-to-school group was actually the attendance panels mean that you get the chair of governors and other governors there. They sit there all day, and families don't turn up, so it's a bit of a waste. So we've gone for these individual action plans that have proved very successful in Powys. So I think it's a much more streamlined system. It's almost like a contract, if you like, to say that you agree and the parent agrees that you will improve your attendance and this is how we're going to help you to do it. Most schools now employ pastoral support officers, so that will be the bulk of their work, if you like. But there will also be, heads of year will have responsibilities, so senior management team will have responsibility as well, and that's all factored in. It's nothing extra to what they're doing now. And being able to generate the letters by the SIM system means that nobody's writing, 100 letters well done. They'll just all be able to be churned out with a name on it. So that should be fairly labour intensive, if you like. So there's no additional pressure on teachers. The first part of the school steps are exactly the same, first day response, that type of thing. But it is about making clear the school steps and then the EWO steps.
Matt, did you wish to comment? Sorry.
Yeah, we've used the attendance panels very successfully within our school, with one family going from a 74% attendance with 3 children up to 98. I get your point that parents don't always turn up to them. Considering how good the panel seems to work with the parents that do turn up, is there any way we can make it that is more inviting to parents so that they do, or make it compulsory that they do turn up? Because when they have been there, the effectiveness for us has been quite phenomenal.
And we're not, and if it's worked for a school, we're not saying don't do it. If it works for you, that's fine. I think they probably, and the feedback from the school-to-school group is that they really like the individual attendance plans because it's like a contract for them to sign. So you could do it through a panel, you could do it individually. I think it would be difficult to compel people to turn up, but I suppose you've got the bit of the carrot. The stick would be that if you don't, and there's a series of letters as you can see, if you don't turn up or if your attendance doesn't improve, then you're referred to the EWO, and then we've sent quite a stern letter out, sort of quoting the law, so they understand the seriousness of that.
John Sheridan.
Chair, yeah, just to go back to the councillor's comments there. Actually, teachers is not part of their terms and conditions of service to chase absences. They're there to teach, so it shouldn't be done. And it's ineffective use of their time. The only part they have to do is to record. So it's nothing to do with what they should be doing.
It's usually pastoral support officers. There's usually a pastoral support system in place, and they're the ones that do the liaising.
Would this be the point to ask a question on theme 2, the vulnerable groups? I noticed that the attendance of looked after children is better than average attendance at primary school, but is slightly worse at secondary school. The improved position at primary school, is that just down to luck? Or, I can understand why you've got a problem with secondary pupils, but is that just down to luck, or are we doing additional work with the looked after children, particularly at primary?
I think with looked after children, it's like you were saying earlier, it's very much looking at the context of the data. So some young people, in primary school, their sort of lack placements tend to be more stable and more static, and that we know that where we get sort of bigger issues, if you like, are when children get older. So they are having more frequent moves. They might be moving across county, etc. So I think that probably accounts for it. I think as corporate parents, attendance of LAC pupils is very, very important to us, and I think there's a piece of work that we will need to do multi-agency with social services, I think, because a part of the foster parents' duty will be to make sure in school, and we have a responsibility to corporate parents, so I think that's something that we need to look at with social services. But I think it probably is down to particular circumstances, and for our lots of our secondary LAC pupils, placements break down, and so they end up pinging around the system a little bit. And certainly we take an awful lot of young people from other authorities as well as the LAC, so that can have an effect on schools' attendance too.
Mr. Williams, sorry.
Just going back to Matt Ford's point on attendance for these attendance panels and everything else with families. We discussed this quite a lot about Aberystwyth, and obviously there is parents, families out there who've had extremely challenging family educational background themselves, and obviously the thought of going up to school themselves for their children can be very intimidating, not the best place to be. I'd just like to know how do you reach out to parents like that? I know in Aberystwyth the strategy has been a lot of home visits, which has worked well, where parents and these families are in a much better environment, rather than trying to drag them into a school and force them to sit down in front of a panel, which probably intimidates and terrifies them.
Can I just say I need to declare an interest. Maybe I do have a family member that works in our second school for good to be.
Yeah, I mean, the education welfare officers are very skilled at going and doing home visits, and they develop really, really strong relationships with lots of these families. And I think it is about support and challenge, and they are very, very supportive, and we try to be as supportive as we possibly can. And I think we do that. For some of our EWOs, it's constant home visits and developing relationships and getting the trust, and then getting the young person sort of into school. So it does take a lot of hard work. But I've got huge confidence in our EWOs. They've been together for a long time. They're very, very experienced, and they go out there and pound the miles, do the miles.
Yeah. Can I come back in on EWO? Yeah, we appreciate that, and EWOs do build up a fantastic relationship with some of the parents. Unfortunately, then we move the EWO, and that relationship breaks down, and we have a dip in a school. Do we endeavour to try and keep EWOs? Or do we just think, oh, this one's really good, so I'll move them to this school that's not doing so well, and try and improve them, and then the one that they were in the first place goes downhill a bit?
We look at we allocate their time based on a formula, if you like, which looks at the school, the context, FSM, etc. So we allocate a certain number of hours. We try not to move them around, but for sometimes personal preference, they might come to you and say, I've been doing this patch for a few years now, and I'd like a change. So we try to take that into account as well. We try not to move them very often. We did have a move around sort of this year, and I suppose as well we're trying to be more flexible. So we're trying to with the EWOs now, we've sort of said you may suddenly find that your workload is increasing because of circumstances, and attendance is dropping. So in a school that we look at their attendance, it's falling. So we might be sort of saying to other EWOs, who can we put in there to help and assist, which is what we did with one comprehensive school last year. We actually sort of brought in more EWOs to support that EWO to sort of try and halt the decline in attendance. So we don't do it lightly. We don't move, but some of them, for example, may want to move a patch for all sorts of reasons.
Can I just ask, are all schools using the same criteria for authorising holidays? And if not, why not?
Fixed penalty notices. We have not issued any fixed penalty notices in Torfaen. And several other authorities in this area haven't either. It is quite an ambiguous piece of legislation, and I think it it's still the head teacher's discretion whether or not they want to authorise absences or not. The Welsh Government is currently looking at fixed penalty notices, so they've done a piece of work, they've come and consulted with us, because I think ultimately they realise that it's not almost fit for purpose, so they need to look at it again. And I think it's easy to get hung up on fixed penalty notices as being all about unauthorised holidays and holidays. So I suppose, where I would see them more successful is looking at patterns of absence. So if you're looking at, everybody having a Friday afternoon off, you could use it for that, or constant lates, it might be used for that. I think it sort of seems to be the fixed penalty notices for the holidays. And I've done training myself with governing bodies on fixed penalty notices, and I use a set of case studies, and wherever at the end of the training, I give the case studies to the governing bodies and say, right, discuss whether or not you'd allow these, you'd allow this authorised absence or not. 100% of the time they say, yes, we'd let that happen, yes, we'd allow that. So it's a really difficult piece of legislation. I also think that we've got bigger tools in our arsenal, if you like. Our normal sort of prosecution process is more effective. I think the fixed penalty notices are problematic. I think they cost more. If you're going to fine somebody, for some people, they might weigh up the cost of a holiday out of season, weigh up the cost of the fine and think, well, actually, I'll pay the fine because it's cheaper. So I think there's an awful lot of work that still needs to be done on fixed penalty notices. And I know that the Welsh Government are looking at this, and we're hoping, we said we'd come back and revisit it after December, hopefully when their new guidance is out, and we'll discuss it with our head teachers and with our schools to make sure that we're looking at that. If you look at fines, for example, if somebody doesn't pay their fine, it costs more to collect the money than it does to fine them. So I really think it is a problem area, and we've taken a decision that we'll look at this in the new year, when hopefully there'll be some new guidance, and we'll be able to issue clear guidance for our schools as well.
Yeah, you mentioned now authorised and unauthorised absences. The case came up earlier when we were discussing of this, where they authorised the absence at primary school, but their sibling was in secondary school, and of course they refused the absence. It sounds to me as if we need more consistency across. And I understand why it's much more difficult at secondary, because particularly if they're in certain levels of year, just before they take the GCSE is not a cool time to take a fortnight's holiday. But, are we trying to get heads to apply these rules much more consistently?
We are. We do sort of training on codes every year, so we've got consistency around codes. You'd be amazed at how many missing marks we have from schools, actually, when you look at their data, which is a quick trick. We are trying to be consistent, and I think that's why we've decided, all the fixed penalty guidance is in this document, but I'm really hoping that the Welsh Government might come up with something that is much more prescriptive for us all, so we can all be consistent. Because if you think about it, you could have a pupil in one school in this borough applies one set of principles, and a pupil in another borough that applies a completely different set of principles. So I think we do need to see where the lead from Welsh Government is coming, but we do discuss it at head teachers' meetings. As I say, when the new guidance comes out, we will come to a consensus together, I think, about holidays. But I'd like to see fixed penalty notices being used just in a different way for lateness and patterns and things like that, because I think then they could be useful. But I think we just need to wait and see what the Welsh Government come up with. I suppose there was a lot of backtracking after the case in England, the Isle of Wight case, and I think that caused an awful lot of discussion. I've had 2 conversations with the Welsh Government, and they were sort of coming up with a set of 4 ideas as to whether they would change it, completely change it, not change it at all, or just tinker with it. So I'm hoping they'll come back with the if Welsh Government could be prescriptive, I think that would help us all.
I ask pupils their feelings on this and how they could help to improve attendance, what they could do?
Yes. When we looked at the rewards and awards, we asked our school attendance group to go back and ask the councils what they would like. And they said they would like vouchers because we were in and ahhing and what kind of vouchers. So they wanted these, I think it's called My Shopping vouchers, because you can use those in a whole range of stores. So that's what they said that they would like, so we kept that. And what we're hoping is that through the school-to-school attendance group, we know we get lots of good practice and exchanges of good practice, what's working in one school. But I think we're hoping with the communication strategy as well, for pupils to actually start, taking pictures of each other, just sending in new slogans and getting involved with that whole system, if you like. So we have used pupil voice, and I know that schools use a lot of pupil voice, especially when some of them give reward trips to cinemas and ice skating and things like that they do it on whole school levels.
Schools in the communication strategy that they've got with the photographs they're taking, with the helping the school advertise how well it's doing at attendance?
So, yes, we will be. Communication strategy has barely started yet, but part of that will be supporting schools to use their own channels, which are a vital channel to parents, who are obviously a massive influencer on pupil attendance. Part of that will be encouraging, as Tracy has explained, this element of celebration, because celebration is really important to altering pupil behaviour, but also a degree of competitiveness, so that schools can see where they are in the kind of league table. And also that we celebrate those schools who have the most improved figures per month, because that's obviously critical. There can only be one at the top of the table, but you can be most improved and be celebrated equally. When we start? It's starting now, really. We've got now live information on the Strive for 95 campaign on the council's web pages, so anyone searching for school attendance can see that. Rebecca at the moment is bringing up some of the products that you'll be able to see. So that, if you can see the screen, that is an outdoor banner which is going to go outside schools on school railings, and if you flip between them, Rebecca, we'll just keep. Pick any one, and I'll go through them just to show the consistency. So this is the poster that's going to appear in schools and in businesses and in places where people congregate. It's got the key messages. It's got the incentive included. It's got the red, amber, green. But we've used the image of a mobile phone screen and a text message, which is obviously a common language now across primary and secondary age children, something that works across age groups. We think it's different, we think it's eye-catching, we think it'll stop people and contains the necessary key messages, but also the signposts to where parents and other groups can get more information. That then, this is the content for Torvine Talks. This will be hitting all homes in October, the first week in October. So Strive for 95 is on our 21st Century Schools page, again with the consistent imaging and messaging. The content there is essentially a press release, which I currently have being translated by our Welsh translators and is pretty much ready to go. So in this end of September, we will have a kind of soft launch saying Torvine Council has started this initiative. It'll appear in the press. It'll then hit doorsteps in Torvine Talks. It's already on the website, so if you go to the image, Rebecca, that's the web page. So again, with an electronic banner at the top showing the Strive for 95. we've got the plus there as well, emphasising the point Tracy made, that we want 95 plus. That also has an electronic banner on the front page of the council website, so we have a scrolling electronic banner. That changes with different campaign materials. Strive for 95 is now on there. So this is starting to creep out. One of the big milestones for us will be when we get September's report. Because then in October, as well as all this hitting, we can do our first round of visiting schools, seeing the schools get their performance figures, starting to share the information, building up that knowledge, awareness and interest in the campaign. We've also then followed that through. There's a letter there, which is a little bit unusual to have a letter from the executive member. But what Tracy was mentioning about this letter going home, we've again followed through the emojis appearing in the letter from the executive member. Letters going home, I'm a parent. You don't always read every detail, but actually one that may look a bit different and is consistent with something they're seeing in school, on the outside of school, on other channels. We hope will just draw a little bit more attention to it, make it stand out as a little bit different from the sort of run-of-the-mill letter you get home from the council.
We just wanted to make sure, actually, that, and Neil's absolutely right, how often do you get congratulated as a parent for playing a part in yeah, so we just thought it would be a really nice idea to send that out, to say, well, we really appreciate the efforts you made to ensure that your pupils, been in school, and that's really, really important.
Parents are the biggest influencer on school attendance. Children's behaviour is from the influence of their parents. So if we can encourage particularly parents to congratulate their children, to make a fuss of their children on this, it will obviously that will start to become the norm of a child's behaviour, that being in school is the norm. One of the biggest groups for us to reach is the group of parents that I think they're described. I'll just find it. They're a group that are described as they're absent with parental consent. We've discussed this in the office. We're all parents. All children say, I don't feel very well. Can I stay at home today? And the vast majority of us go to school. You'll feel fine. Get to school. And you send your children to school. However, the ones who are absent with parental consent are the ones we really need to try and reach out to and target, because it's quite easy to say, oh, you're not very well, cut you up in bed, I'll give you a cuddle. Actually, if we can flip all those days into days where they say, go to school, you'll feel better in school, and ring us if you're not well, we know children sometimes try it on, sometimes want a day off. And it's just about trying to get those parents to go, actually, no, I'm not going to be the stay in bed, stay at home response. We want that response to be go to school. So we're quite targeting them. And the messaging, Tracy mentioned earlier, this is, we're trying to be very positive in the messaging so that the not in, miss out keeps coming through all school communication. Schools promote what's on in school, what's good about school, rather than it being negative about what's not good about absence. So flipping the message around to make sure that we've got schools and the council sending constructive messages to say all the good reasons why your child should be in school. And we know, the correlation between attendance and achievement is exceptionally high, and there are a huge range of complex reasons why poor attendance then also results in poor achievement and a whole host of other issues that require intervention.
PowerPoint that we put together for schools is it is about that, because if you're not in, you do miss out. You don't make those friendships, and it's more difficult to go back. So that's the cycle that we want to break. And all the sort of key messages we've got going out on social media, it's quite simple, but remember there are 175 days in a year that you can spend on family time visits, holiday shopping, household jobs, other appointments. Try and make appointments for doctors and dentists outside school hours, or if you do have to make them, like first thing in the morning so then you can go to school, or sort of last thing in the afternoon. And I suppose I know that's one of the big drives that Aberystwyth had, was to try to say, well, it doesn't matter, you know, if it's 11 o'clock and you're not in school, it's still better to come in at 11 o'clock than it is to miss the whole day. So it's just trying to reinforce those positive messages all the time. So it will be a drip, drip, drip on Facebook that we'll be sending out to try and influence everyone.
How do the Welsh schools then compare with our English schools with regard to attendance and etc.?
If you have a look at, you can see where the attendance levels of our Welsh schools are. I suppose for the Welsh schools, you know, it's like everybody else. They need a refresh like everybody else. So we'll make sure that all these items are available in Welsh language as well, as we have to. I suppose it might be slightly, transport could play a part for Welsh schools, because if you miss your bus in the morning, you know, it's more difficult to get somebody to give you a lift to, you know, to get to school, isn't it? So I think that's important as well, just to make sure that you're up in time for the bus. And it's about helping and supporting those parents to make sure that the youngsters are on the bus. If I could just come in as well about sort of diseases and being off school, I think we see this web page as being able to give some messages out to help schools. So, for example, you know, if you've got you might have an outbreak of sickness and diarrhea, that we say, you know, you might need to be off for 48 hours. People understand that people get sick, but it's about ringing in and making sure school know that you're sick. We did a similar thing about measles in the summer, to say that, you know, some schools thought they had an outbreak of measles, but they didn't. And we got GP advice, and we can put that out. And I've done it in the past with scabies as well. So it's about sort of making sure those messages can get out to everybody.
Councillor Two.
I was going to say, how does like bad weather and like sicknesses affect you 95%? Does that affect if the whole school's off?
Yeah, if your school was closed for bad weather, there's a special code for that, so we don't take that into account. But obviously, sickness does play a part, and I think it's about just encouraging parents to know that, you know, if you've got a cold, you might need 1 or 2 days off, but you don't need 3 weeks off. So I think it's that really, and it's about that support as well for parents, because they've got the number of EWOs, they can always ring up and take advice. But I suppose not being in school can easily become a habit. So it's much harder. The more school you miss, the much harder it is to go to school, because you've missed out. You know, you don't know what's happening in lessons. You've missed out on all that. You've missed out on friendship groups as well. So it is really important to sort of get that message about turning up.
Sorry, one of the big issues, we've had a couple of mild winters where we haven't had many schools closed, but one of the big issues a few years ago was actually schools opening and then children not turning up for school, which does have an impact on school attendance figures. And at the time, teachers were, head teachers were bringing their concern to us that they were putting in all their effort to open their school and then feeling punished for actually having poor attendance figures. So a bit of a contradiction there, or something we had to work through, but definitely severe weather can have an impact.
Councillor Cameron. Oh, sorry.
With Victoria Village School is closing, and I don't think they've sorted out what they're going to do, busing the kids to school, or is there safe walking routes, because it is in a valley, the kids got to walk up the hill. We was told they're not allowed to walk one route, they've got to walk around. What are they going to be doing about that? It's going to be really bad when it opens next year, Ganteg, full of all the village kids.
We've got I'll bring that up actually, because funny enough, we've got a transition planning meeting on Friday, so I'll bring that up as well. I mean, I know that I'm heavily involved with the ALN pupils to make sure that for those people with additional learning needs, we've got a really good and secure plan for each of them to transition. So we're going to have a long transition period for them. We're going to make sure we exchange all the information and we get that in place. But I'll certainly bring that up on Friday and make sure that we've thought about that, because if there are no safe routes, then we will have to look at transport.
They've dropped a lot of curbs in the area, making a safe walk. It looks like they're making a safe walking route. But there's a lot of single mothers living in Victoria Village who've got 200 yards to go to school. Now they've got to walk 2.3 miles the safe way around with 3 children and a buggy in the winter freezing cold, hail, snow, not going to be done. Then,
I'll take that back.
Okay.
Yeah.
Karen, did you?
Yeah, please. Looking at the figures, the attendance for free school meals pupils is significantly poorer than that for non-free school meals pupils. What are we doing? Are we trying to target the parents? Are we trying to target the children? Or are we or are we giving that to the schools to deal with?
The achievement of our free school meals mirrors the attendance levels as well. We've discussed this in the school-to-school group, and actually I suppose this is our general campaign, but then the EWOs will be aware of those vulnerable pupils on free school meals. Interestingly, the point that schools brought up was that, and certainly the head teacher from Garnteg was saying that she looks at her attendance levels and she always writes a comment on the reports. And when she was looking at reports for this July, she did notice that actually it wasn't the free school meal pupils in her school whose attendance was low, it was the band beyond that sometimes become free school meals and then aren't, so they're slipping in and out of free school meals depending on their benefits. And we know that there are big benefit changes coming, so that's certainly a piece of work that we're going to be looking at with the school-to-school attendance group. And it's something we've discussed about how we do engage and make sure that we're not missing out on those pupils as well. So that's something we're going to look at and work on together because we have flagged it up.
Has there been any trials or is there any support for doing like a walking bus to school? Obviously, primarily it's going to be for primary schools, but I just think it would affect the attendance, the punctuality, and for families, single parents, that's going to go 4 children if one's ill, that they don't want to bring the one out to take the other 3 to school. So I'm just wondering whether that's been an avenue to go down.
Funny enough, that was something that we thought we'd discuss at the school-to-school attendance group, so we'd sort of pick a couple of weeks where we thought the weather was quite good so that we'd actually sort of try and promote that, really. So that is something that we have thought about. And I know that when my daughter walking bus and it was successful, so it would be worth looking at that. I think times change because that was quite a long time ago. And I think if you've got lots of parents who are working, it's really about who you can get to actually manage the walking bus, if you like, and that's a lot of responsibility. But we were thinking in schools it could perhaps be pastoral support officers and perhaps EWOs might give a hand as well. So we'll see.
Evans, and then
Sorry, just to come back on the walking bus at my children's school, the teaching assistants run walking bus.
Oh, great.
They rotate it through the week, and they do mornings and afternoons, and we have 2 walking buses actually, one going up and one going down, and they bring the kids into school, and it's very, very well attended. Coediva,
brilliant.
Yeah, very well attended. It's always packed with children with all their high vis on, and wonderful.
Yeah, just coming back on what Glyn said, with the free school meals and the differences between free school meals and non-free school meals, is there any part of the PDG ring-fenced towards ensuring children are in school and attendance?
Yes, many schools choose out of their PDG to employ a pastoral support officer. Many schools. And it's the one stream of funding, if you like, that I think is actually targeted, because schools have to produce plans to say how they're targeting that money towards those particular pupils. So I think they vary. I can't hardly think of a school that doesn't have a pastoral support officer that actually would be employed through PDG. And that's as well as all the perhaps intervention programmes that they've got running for PDG as well.
Councillor.
Hello, good afternoon. I make an observation, make a historical observation, and then a question following it. When I was in secondary school, the consultant diabetologist at the Royal Gwent Hospital held an after-school clinic for diabetics. I was wondering if there has been any liaison with the NHS to the NHS providing more school time-friendly services. You know what I mean? More services outside school hours.
We work very closely with the health service.
Yeah.
There is a new managing healthcare needs policy, or supporting the healthcare of learners policy, that's come through from Welsh Government, and we're going to adopt that and sort of roll that out in January. And in there are specific plans, and it places duty on schools to make sure that they've looked at diabetes and epilepsy, and they look at each particular medical need of the pupils and how they're going to support in those plans. So, and I would expect in those plans for there to be support from other agencies and schools to use that. Our school nurses are very proactive, and actually there's lots of very proactive health interventions within schools. I haven't heard about after-school interventions, but that's something I sit on the Children and Young People's Partnership Health Boards, and that's something I can take back and ask them. I've not heard of any so far.
Can I just ask about free school meals? On page 35, we have the tables there. And accepting that the 2016-17 is invalidated, there are two schools there that actually they're very big differentials. One 13.4 and one 13.9. I wonder if you've got any comments on that, please.
So are you looking at the 13.4?
13.4
Yeah.
and 13.9.
Lantana and St David's.
Lantana and St David's schools.
I think what you have to remember as well is that because it's the cohort size, so each pupil, each FSM pupil in a different school will have a different percentage value. So in some schools with large numbers of FSM and big populations, there'll be less than those in small schools with small FSM. So it is cohort size.
Right.
So it's a very blunt tool, if you like. It's looking at the context behind that.
Right, okay. About going back to Neil and our comm strategy, all the information that you're rolling out there for schools, banners and posters and things, are schools being charged for those, or are they?
No, we have a modest budget.
Modest, yeah.
To produce some materials, which probably at this point the greatest expense will be the outdoor banners that will go outside every school, including Crown Bridge and Prue, so every location. And then there's a small budget for printing some other materials, of which they're not very expensive to produce either the certificates or the posters. And then we will be using our free channels, so utilising our website, utilising our social media to keep pushing the messages, which doesn't cost the service anything.
I'd just like to say it's all coming out of my ALN budget.
EWS, have we got sufficient support with the education welfare officers now to help support this new policy?
Yes. We've looked at this, and actually, I suppose we should probably keep this quiet and whisper it. Our ratio of EWOs to pupils is good. I've looked at the other consortia areas, and it's worse than ours. So I think at the moment, I think we're okay. And actually, I think sort of schools and this refresh will actually sort of free up more time for them to concentrate on the really, really difficult cases. I'm hoping, so it should lift us all up. But obviously, for the EWS, it will mean that they'll be concentrating on the most problematic cases, which is where their work should be. So, yes, I'm content at the minute.
Are there any other questions for Neil or Tracy? No? Okay, thank you very much for coming along this afternoon and answering our questions. Thank you. If we go back then to our agenda item 6, our scrutiny reports, we need now to make some recommendations. Just looking at, we consider the Council the current position on attendance and review the effectiveness and support to schools, and whether we wish to offer any recommendations on the attendance strategy or the communication strategy. Offer our views. Any comments?
I'd like to say, because I'd like to congratulate the people concerned in the communication strategy. It looks to me like it's got some, it is a very positive strategy, and it's, it seems to me that there is no reason that I can see why it won't work. They seem to have made a significant understanding of the issues involved. We've spoken to them. But if there's one recommendation I would make, is that we try somehow to focus more on the free school meals pupils. We had a discussion Monday afternoon for those members who were there about the welfare changes as they were applied to schools to do with their results over free school meals. The welfare changes are going to mean that there's less free school meal pupils. So it's actually going to push down that differential, because some of those, there's already a number of what should be free school meals pupils in the non-free school meals area, because the parents don't accept the free school meals. So it pushes that differential slightly down. But then, because of the welfare changes, there's now going to be more pupils who are not eligible for free school meals. So it's going to push that differential down again. And I think we need to be aware of the fact that the differential between free school meals and non-free school meals, both in attendance and attainment, is going to move closer. But we need, as an authority, and I think we need as members, to be aware of the fact that part of that is to do with the welfare changes. But I still think that we really do need to make an effort, a slightly bigger effort, around the free school meals area, because they are the pupils who need it most and are there the least.
Any suggestions? So we can say that we're very happy with the report, a positive report, and that we recommend it.
Sorry, yeah, just to add, I made a couple of notes as you were discussing different things, so just one or two points that you may just want to consider going forward, or may not. You did raise the issue about the celebration of pupils who are always attaining over the 95%, but there isn't so much of a mention in the strategy as to, like you said, the pupils that have had poor attendance but have made improvements. So whether there needs to be a focus perhaps on that in the strategy as well, to celebrate those children that have, against the odds, improved their attendance. Tracy also mentioned greater work between us and partner agencies, social services, etc., for the attendance of looked after children. So that needs to be a high priority within the strategy.
Particularly at secondary level.
Particularly, yes, I did have that. Yes, sorry, yeah. She mentioned also with the criteria for authorising leave, there's going to be guidance out, she said, from Welsh Government. So when that does come out, that again, that should be a focus going forward, that they try and standardise the criteria going forward for all schools so that they're all working off the same criteria for authorising absences.
Do you think it would be worthwhile that coming to us? Sorry. Do you think it would be worthwhile that? I know it seems a very small issue, and perhaps I don't think it's enough for us to consider it a full meeting. But I think it would be good for us to have it even, to have it just maybe as a note, so that we can acknowledge it.
If you recall, we always have sort of March, April time. We have our recommendations back and the responses to those and the impact that they've had and where they are. So perhaps we could do it in that sort of forum, and you can have your update there as to what impact that's had. And also, Councillor Shepherd, you raised the issue about the walk-in bus and whether that's something that they can explore further, and again, perhaps feedback to us on the potential for that. Perhaps look at some areas where that, throughout the borough, where that may be useful, and how it can be organised, and obviously share the best practice that you raised with Coediva School using that.
Peter.
So what I'll do now, I will type up those recommendations in consultation with the chair, and then I'll forward them to you for you to look through via email before we then send them on to the officers for their responses back. Okay.
Sorry, attendance. Agenda item 7, School Standards Monitoring Subcommittee Report, and pages 123 to 138. Members can see there the reports of the Schools Subcommittee, and these are really just for information. Okay.
Is it me, or have I missed something there? But recommendation 1 on Appendix 1, Aberystwyth School, that says that the committee wrote a letter to the Welsh Government Secretary for Education reinforcing their concerns regarding the quality supply teachers and the lack of regulations imposed on the agencies that employ them. There's nothing in there?
No, that is ongoing at the moment. I am working with the chair. We will get a letter formulated and that sent off. There were just timing issues with that when that was recommended, but that will definitely be happening.
I feel as you mentioned Aberystwyth School, I will mention my interest. I've got a family member that works there. Okay.
Me too, sorry.
Chair.
Sorry.
Can I just clarify then what was going to happen about that the issue and with regard to supply teachers?
Yeah. So at the time, the subcommittee were concerned that some schools were having poor quality or constant changes, and that it's not regulated in any way, shape or form. So the subcommittee wanted to write to the Minister for Education to see if there's any work ongoing or what can be done to sort of look at that area.
So just to update then, Chair, if I may, a report's been written for the Welsh Government on supply teachers. And if any of you have anything to do with schools, you know how it's unfortunately the engagement, employment and treatment of supply teachers is a nothing short of a national disgrace, really. The shady practices employed by these agencies is sailing close to the wind legally in many cases. So there is a report, I think, with the Welsh Government at this moment in time, which has been written by, I think, the ex-Director of Education, Vega Glamorgan. But I suppose when you get a response, we'll know, may know where we are with respect to what is going to happen with respect to that. Because I think Aberystwyth's problem is not Aberystwyth's problem; it's every school's problem.
No. And that's why we were determined to write that letter then, because it was found that a common theme throughout schools. So once we have sent that off and we have had a reply, we will feed it back to the whole committee, not just the subcommittee. So you're all up to date on that.
Thank you for that information, John.
Sorry, Chair. Page 131, recommendation 2 to the LEA. Is it just a typo that there's 2 ticks there? Because one seems to be in the margin and the other one...
Something's happened with the IT on PDF in that bit.
that they hadn't rejected part of it and accepted.
As I said, these reports really are for noting. You can just see the work that has been going on in the Schools Monitoring Subcommittee.
Could I make a comment, Chair, on the page 133 and following? A couple of comments, really. I suppose with respect to the passages about carried appropriate curriculum planning on the bottom of page 133 with respect to the potential establishment of a new sixth form college. Obviously it will be the sixth form college that will carry that curriculum planning, it won't be the local authority. So I don't know why that's in there. And also, just to make the point over the page, that it's talked about that that there are the group working closely. There's no mention there about actually the role of the employee organisations, the unions, let's just say. And there's nothing being done with respect to that, and that's actually there are significant issues with respect to job security at the moment and potential redundancies for many teaching staff in those three schools, which is yet to be resolved. The other point I'd make is on page 135, 136, recommendations 4 to 7 seem to be exactly the same. I don't know whether I'm missing something there.
Yeah, there's been an issue with that PDF, and I think there's yeah. Sorry about that.
Okay. Is the 29th of November.
And just to remind members that visioning, you selected school attainment as your item to be considered in the November meeting. There was the seminar on Monday where I believe you were taking through some of the data, so that'll be a chance to go through it in more detail at the November meeting.
So.
Thank you very much. We declare the meeting closed. Thank you.